Why do so many startups fail? In short, the same reason why Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany were hammered into the ground in World War II: unrealistic expectations, committing to one thing too many, not able to meet demands, and as always, problems brewing from the senior management. Let's look into these one at a time. 1. Unrealistic expectations. Make no mistake that at the beginning of the war, Hitler's army was dominant. In startup lingo, this basically means that the tech was great. They were fantastic, but as the war moved into stages when the Allied forces began attacking competition from new startups, they were simply second best. Another way this can be looked at is that they simply did not have the numbers to match the Allied forces. Again, in startup lingo, there was simply not enough funding and inability to scale. 2. Continuing from my previous point. Towards the end of the war, Hitler began assuming sole control of the Nazi army. Everything apart from the Luftwaffe was within his control. He gave an order that no army division should retreat. These came in situations when the army was significantly pinned down. While Churchill was focusing on evacuation on a similar front. Churchill was a pragmatist and someone who believed in the strength of his numbers. The lesson from here is that a startup should look into saving as much money as possible and not burn through money. It can end disastrously. 3. Committing to one thing too many. In 1939, Hitler invaded Poland. He opened up a front in Norway and was embroiled in a battle against Great Britain in the English Channel, following France's conquest. He also sent forces to support his weak link, which was Italy in North Africa. At the same time, he made possibly the biggest mistake that cost him the war, opening a front against the Soviet Union. I have seen startups do this time and again, taking on one thing too many. I myself have had problems with this in the past with my startup. 4. Co-founder problems. Every startup has been through this. This is something that is kept from the public eye for the odd gullible person who thinks that startups are rainbows and whistles. Towards the end of the war, Hitler fired almost all of his senior management. In fact, Hermann Göring and Erwin Rommel were the only ones who were not fired from their posts. In hindsight, the WW2 was one of the bloodiest massacres ever and to this day has severe implications on Europe. Greece, Spain, Italy and a few other countries are in deep shit economically. You mean that two guys who might have never worked before, with no experience of making tough business decisions, with no financial experience or cash cushion, putting together a product that was never seen and entering a market that doesn't exist, with a brand that no one cares and a business entity with no real process, but still taking on large complex problems do fail often? Yeah, what do you expect? So many startups fail because new and risky ideas are by design failure prone. I worked for a startup factory project within Microsoft, where they assembled some of the best scientists and engineers tasked with building new ideas. There was money, there was experience, there was Microsoft's brand and distribution channels. Despite all that, most ideas never succeeded. For another company, I was managing new venture creation and it was quite hard to push new products despite having large customers for the existing product and the brand name. New ideas fail everywhere with a high probability. If the risk of failure were not there, someone else would have done that already. Startups by design take those ideas that have a slim chance of success. It is not like IBM could not have built an operating system for microcomputers. Just that they rightly guessed it was risky and the market not big. But, it actually turned out to be a huge market due to changing economic conditions and Microsoft ruled the roost. Walmart entered e-commerce late as they believed people were not likely to buy through computers. The internet evolved way too fast for them to react. Blank. As a startup founder, you are entering a lonely coast known for tsunamis. You might drown by the huge wave or might actually catch a huge amount of fish that no one else is taking. You are trying to put a completely new concept or a new market and assemble a group of people who might not have worked together. While they might have studied together, working together is a different ball game. There is no process to hold the discipline and no brand to lean on. The cash cushion is not big enough to withstand multiple failures and the executives might have no experience wading through tough times. There is no real HR process to manage talent and no good financial management. There is no established relationship with customers and no established channels. Product quality is often poor in the early days and customer support not as professional. It is just a miracle that some startups even succeed. Startups that got incredibly lucky being at the right time with the right people succeeded. Most others with similar capabilities died. And many of the startups that die should not have existed in the first place. It might be a feeble attempt by a group of people who might have met at a meetup and decided to try something for a few months. Or a lone ranger trying to build the next big thing. Or some new grads who try something before getting a good job. For startups with founders who have experience, connections and a team, the failure rate is not as high. The failure rate is just proportional to the risk of the idea itself. Starting a new business is not a child's play. It requires a lot of hard work, dedication, discipline and most of all patience. If it's your first venture, even figuring out where to start is riddled with complexity. Which industry should you operate in? What product should you sell? Which customers can you target? What's the competition like? All of these questions can cause stress and anxiety for entrepreneur, especially considering the high failure rate of startups. But while building a business from scratch is intimidating, it doesn't have to hold you back. If you are passionate and want to build something from scratch, you should go for it, but like I mentioned, do this only if you're really passionate about it. If you want to start your own startup, be it any industry, just because it's kinda cool, then my words, my friend, it isn't. Unfortunately, many new startups won't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Every startup indeed goes through a difficult phase or even a complete failure at the start before they soar high. I am no expert, but with little wisdom I have, I would try to answer your question. To begin with, I don't really subscribe to the view that 95% of startups fail. We tend to assume the word startup in a very single-dimensional thought process. Nonetheless, I have had a failed startup of my own, so when I answer this question, at least some parts of my answer are coming straight from the heart. Startups fail because of one simple reason, and that is that they fail to do sales. Now, we can use multiple synonyms and jargons to provide a context to this, but there is one and only one reason, which is the failure to do sales. Now, let's try to dig deep into the reason for poor sales. There could be multiple reasons, but I will try to categorize them into 4 basic reasons. 1. The market isn't ready for your product. This plainly means that your target customers are not being able to perceive any incremental value from your product as of now, and hence do not wish to pay for your product. Since customers are not sure as of now, they shall wait, but you cannot. Eventually, you fail unless you have the patience to wait it out. 2. You do not have significant funds to make things work. Good things take time to be built, and time is money, and money is a scarce resource. Quite a lot of times, entrepreneurs are so passionate about their vision that they lose sight of the environment around them. Startups are nothing but just a wagon whose engine is the founders. Sometimes, you just lose sight of reality, and by the time you realize it, it's just too late. You don't have the cash to run the show. Eventually, you fail until you are able to get someone to fund you. 3. The founder doesn't have the competence. To put it bluntly, ideas can be great, but most of the time, it is all about execution and delivery which matters. Sometimes the founders, their team, and in some cases both, are just not good enough. In some cases, they lack vision, capability, domain experience or expertise, and this leads to eventual failure of the startup. 4. The business model is outright stupid. This is my personal story. I was working on a model which did not have future, and I got myself and my team so stuck up into making it work when it was just not supposed to work out. Activity and making things better is good, but there has to be a sense of fiscal responsibility. The business model needs to have the scope of growth, in terms of scale, value and revenue. Quite a lot of times, startups get entangled into a trading mindset. Trading mindset is not bad, but one needs to remember a fact that eventually, someone will burst into the scene who will do the job better than you do. Unless you don't add any incremental value for your buyers or users, you are destined to fail. If the buyer or user is not ready to pay for your product, you are destined to fail. To sum it up, there can be innumerable reasons why a startup can fail. There could be a lot of intangibles involved. However, cliché it may be, failure is important for understanding success. Success can get you a credit card with airport lounge access. Failure takes you to a drawing board. Trust me, airport lounges are overrated.